The Downtown East Advocacy Letter is an urgent call to action addressed to government officials, agencies, and other organizations to tackle the severe lack of safe indoor spaces for people experiencing homelessness this pandemic winter.
The Downtown East Advocacy Letter came about because many of the agencies in our neighborhood, in particular in the Downtown East, have seen a significant increase in frostbite cases. 2 days ago, there was someone in our drop-in who had just been released from the hospital the day before. Her hands are stumps, as are her feet, and she was bleeding with bandages still on these stumps.
The letter expresses valid concern, stating, "When people have nowhere to go, it is inevitable that many will end up in emergency rooms, and this is adding pressure to our overburdened hospital system. Sadly, the city has literally closed the door on these most vulnerable people in this time of great urgency, as almost all city-funded community center services have been suspended during the pandemic."
As the advocacy letter stated, a lot of spaces that were available for people are closed now. For example, the whole Out of the Cold program is a good example of a program that allowed people to get warm on the coldest nights of the winter. Businesses in general and other community services have been closed due to COVID, so people who are living outside have fewer places to shelter.
These closures have put a strain on the few agencies, like the All Saints Church Community Center, that have remained open and servicing unhoused folks, while COVID restrictions have decreased their capacity to aid the growing number of people in need.
We have not closed during the pandemic. We have been open. We were open through the entire first wave, one of 8 drop-in centers across the city to do so. We have limited space. There are, I think, 3 indoor drop-ins open in the Downtown East, in the entire Downtown East on weekdays, and there's even less on weekends.
So one of the most challenging parts of working through COVID is our reduced capacity. We're only able to have 30 people in our space. We went from having over 100 people at lunchtime to only 30 people.
Unfortunately, we've had to suspend many of our programs due to COVID restrictions. We still do have a daily meal program. That is the one program that has massively expanded during COVID.
We're only allowed to have about 30 people in the space, so we have 30 people inside, but we still do takeout as well. So throughout the whole day, we're still doing over 100 meals.
And although the City of Toronto has moved at unprecedented speed to adjust its services for those experiencing homelessness by creating 2,300 spaces in new temporary shelters and hotel programs for physical distancing, the effort has seemed to come up short in the face of the crisis.
And we're seeing a significant increase also in people who are street homeless who have nowhere to go at all.
Well, the shelter system has been largely full during the entirety of the COVID crisis. They did open up a few hotels and created these shelter hotel programs. But even so, the supply doesn't meet the demand. So, if you were to call central intake, which is the phone number that you call in order to access a shelter space, most of the time you'll be turned down. So the city has sort of wants people to believe that there is tons of space inside and that people are choosing to live outside despite that. But the reality is that there are people who have been looking to go into the shelter system for months and months and have been turned down over and over again. Yeah, as of January 2021, there is at least close to 8,000 people experiencing homelessness in Toronto and only just over 6,000 spaces in the shelter system. So there actually is a lack of space for people to go inside.
However, even if shelter space is available, more often than not, it is not the safest, most viable option.
Apart from the risk of COVID in a congregate setting, there's also many factors, including some of these shelter hotels are very far away from people's community and services and family and supports. And these congregate settings are just not a safe and accessible place for everyone to go.
What I've heard, some of the experiences that people have had in shelters, I really do understand why they might be shelter averse. I mean, the other day someone told me that he had been sexually assaulted in a shelter and someone had posted the video online. So understandably, he's not going to go to a shelter.
Without options,
folks have chosen to live in encampments instead of going to the shelter system as well. And I think that says everything you need to know. If there were good options for people, and there were enough of those good options, we wouldn't see so many people living outside in encampments.
These Toronto resident encampments have also welcomed tiny shelters, an initiative by Khalil Save Right, a Toronto carpenter raising money for and building small, isolated wooden structures for people to survive the winter outside. The city, however, has not been thrilled with the tiny shelters and filed for legal action against SaveRight in mid-February as it tirelessly works to remove tiny shelters from public parks.
The shelters I built are a small part of a temporary solution to keep people alive until they can access alternative housing. Each shelter includes a smoke and carbon monoxide detector and a fire extinguisher. I gave the tiny shelters to the community to decide how best to use them and who needs them most. Encampment residents tell me how important the tiny shelters have been for their safety, for their privacy, and dignity. I hope there will be a day that the tiny shelters are no longer needed, but that day has not yet come. Instead of working with me, the city sued to stop me from building and relocating the tiny shelters. This is only a distraction. The problem is not the tiny shelters. The problem is that Toronto's most vulnerable people are falling through the cracks. People tell me they have nowhere to go. The money the city is spending to attack me right now could be put into safe housing for those that need it. This pandemic has been a nightmare, particularly for those who don't have a home. The City of Toronto should drop its application against me and focus its resources and efforts on what matters, getting people safely housed. It's February. The city should not be removing or destroying tiny shelters until real alternatives exist and COVID-19 is under control.
Well, we definitely support people's right to live in the tiny shelters, if that is their best option. I mean, the tiny shelters are a response to a crisis, and they're a response to people being left outside in freezing temperatures over the winter.
Besides the urgent action for temporary solutions addressed in the Downtown East Advocacy Letter,
Open some community center space, like the John Innes Center, which is literally down the street from us, which has much better facilities than we do, showers, better bathrooms, all this sort of thing. So that and the warming centers.
the letter ends by pointing out the crucial need for long-term solutions to the root of the problem, a long-standing housing crisis that has not only been exacerbated but visibilized by the dire COVID-19 circumstances.
Prioritizing housing has to be number one.
What people need is affordable permanent housing. The biggest barriers to housing are that there just isn't enough housing. There isn't enough rent geared to income housing. And even the definition that Toronto uses to define what is affordable housing, what Toronto considers to be affordable housing is not affordable for the vast number of people living in Toronto. And there's also just not enough. I think the waiting list is close to 100,000 for affordable housing. I think rent geared to income housing is what we really need.
Relationship building is key to all of that, which is really the ultimate form of harm reduction. When people feel like they're not alone, then they're more likely to be healthier in themselves. They're more likely to take positive steps for positive change.
Those who have been tirelessly working to house, keep safe, and advocate for folks experiencing homelessness remind us that community, as well as safe and truly affordable housing, are a human right.
I think one way that people can help is just being very vocal and public about their support, to call their members of parliament, to call their city councillors, and to call the mayor's office and just express that they don't think the city should be using its resources to displace people. I think people should be aware that the city is largely trying to invisibilize homelessness rather than actually address the systemic factors that create the crisis. Homelessness is a result of policy, and I think that government at every level should feel as much public pressure as possible to address the roots of the crisis, which are a lack of affordable housing.
Please do not forget to like, comment, and share to our channel. Follow us on all our social media platforms. And for more information, please check out our website.